What's going on, y'all? So I want to speak on this, y'all, because of course many of y'all are very well aware that your boy is, is Texan. You know what I'm saying? I was born and raised Texas, got nothing but love for Texas, of course. And I'm a Texan first, before anything. When someone asks, "Oh, well, you American?" If I go to a foreign country, you ask me where I'm from Texas. Plain and simple. And with that being said, there was of course the big floods that happened that hit Texas very hard. Of course, they have hit other places like New Mexico and whatnot. But of course, the way that it hit Texas and the death toll that it had involved with Texas was very significant. And I want to touch on this because there are some crazy people out there, bruv, who were just like immediately talking crazy stuff like, oh, well, they deserve to perish because they were Republicans or because their parents voted Republican or whatever. Like, bro, there's a time and place to say crazy stuff, but this was happening literally like while this was unfolding, while people were like searching for their freaking missing children. You know what I'm saying? There's 27 girls who went missing in the Mystic camp. The death toll is well into the 200s right now. Like, bro, and you have people saying stuff like this, bro. I don't care. Let me just straight out and fly out say, y'all, I don't care two poops what your affiliation is. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's Democratic in the independent or Republican or whatever. I don't care, bro. I don't care. In no situation is this type of reaction or language or point your finger acceptable. So especially to happen right when it did, like while this stuff is unfolding, is beyond me. But I saw so many of these comments across the internet on different platforms, on different videos, where people were literally just like trying to point the blame, like, oh well, well they're Republicans or they voted for so and so, or so. It's like, bro, y'all are out of pocket. You have to realize, and in case y'all don't realize this, but y'all are the issue. Like, you are the issue. It's not the people that you're trying to blame or whatever that are the issue that caused this to happen. No, the fact that there are people like you, the individuals who say stuff like that, who will immediately take this devastating and a horrific situation and immediately start to point fingers at politics and whatnot instead of actually looking at the situation and taking a moment to step back and be like, wow, this is messed up. You know what I'm saying? Like, wow, there's people out there searching for the little kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, the fact that that's how your mind operates lets us all know that you are the individual with the issue. Like, you have the problem, plain and simple. But with that being said, I want to dive on in here and talk about these floods because a lot of people just have a misconception here. Because some people are like, well, why didn't they leave earlier? Well, had the national weather forecast, not been cut or whatever, then they would get higher alerts or whatever. And all these can be potential arguments or whatever. But I wanted to dive into this as a someone who grew up in Texas, of course. I want to dive into this because a lot of people just seem to not really understand how flash floods work. So we're going to dive into here and we're going to explain how flash floods work as well. And we're going to explain just the whole dynamics behind Texas and flash floods and how those two coexist, okay? Because hopefully this will provide some clarification so that when people stop saying crazy stuff and you understand a little bit better that this wasn't just like some situation where you have a day. It's not like a hurricane, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, the hurricane's coming a week prior. And it's like, okay, well, so, like 2 days beforehand, oh, this is going to be a high category hurricane. We should probably leave. No, it's not like that. So the flash in flash floods, like the flash part of flash floods, is quite literally there for a reason. It's not just a title. It's called flash floods for a reason because it happens in a flash. Okay, so just in case you were wondering, in case that was something difficult for you to understand, it happens in a flash. So as you can see here, like this time lapse right here, as you can see, look at the timestamp right there. When this starts, and this isn't even like the worst of the moments right here, but this is just an example here. This happened on the same day during this in the same system, and you can see here. So this is at 13 minutes in, right? This is at 13 minutes in, 10 minutes in. Look how quickly this goes up. You see them backing up. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. That's 7 minutes in already. That's 7 minutes and that's 10 minutes. That is 10 minutes, bro. So when I say flash, it happens in a flash, bro. It's a flash flood, bro. It's a flash flood. You have to understand, y'all, that this whole flood system, like this one that really caused devastation across the Guadalupe, and I'll show you a map of the Guadalupe as well. but this one that causes devastation across the Guadalupe and across all these systems right here. You have to understand that this thing happened in early morning, which is what made it even worse. But you have to understand that this stuff rose significantly. And when I say significantly, I mean it rose 26 feet in 45 minutes. Let that sink in. 26 feet in 45 minutes. When I say flash flood, it is a flash flood. And y'all, look, water is strong as hell. And you have to understand it's not just the water, it's everything that's in the water. So when this water is coming, and it's now not inside the curved out river basin that it normally is in, now it's kind of just spread out across all these different terrains and lands, across the ground and just different lands. So now you have different dips and curves that it's not used to, navigating. It's not a perfectly curved out basin or whatnot, right? Because now it's hitting houses and stop signs. So now you have all this turbulence going on with the water because you're getting dips, you're getting suctions down below. It's just it's a big system going on. You're getting trees pulled down. Now trees are in the water. You can see all this stuff, cars floating in the water, all this stuff. So it's a very dangerous situation. But what we want to show here is more or less the Texas river system. So all y'all understand, y'all. I'm just trying to make this real easy for y'all so y'all can stop saying dumb stuff, okay? The more educated you are on this matter, then maybe perhaps the more you will stop saying ridiculous stuff like y'all are saying and trying to, put blame on this and that and just like, oh, well, why didn't you leave when you got the alerts? Why didn't you leave when you got the alerts? By the way, they were sending out alerts to National Weather was sending out alerts for this, or at least, like they started on July 3rd, I believe. It started on July 3rd. They were sending out alerts for this initially. July 3rd. They started sending out alerts for this initially. Remember, this happened in the early mornings of July 4th. So they started sending out alerts, flood watches, of course. The first significant warning, though, wasn't until like 11 p.m. And that was for the neighboring county of Bandera. And then like the one for Kerr County, which is where Camp Mystic was at and stuff like that, where the 27 girls went missing. Um, that didn't happen until the early mornings, like 1 a.m. for the warning. So at that point, it was too late. At that point, it was too late. But pretty much this was an abnormal system. That's really what it was. It was one of those situations where the type of system that it was, it can be difficult to predict in the first place because you're relying on a national weather forecast, and it needs to be. This is a pinpoint, localized type situation. So that's what happened here. So it's a very pinpoint, localized situation, and that's why you had this flash flood happen. You can kind of predict, so and so and so, but they didn't predict it stalling over this area and how impactful it would be if it stalled over the area, and it stalled over there. So it just sat there. It just sat there and just rain continued to drop. So as a result, the predictions that they gave were completely off. If you're wondering what those predictions were, by the way, I believe it was like 5 to 6 inches or something like that. Let me check real quick. Yeah, it was 5 to 7 inches was the original prediction there that they gave. And it was 12 to 20 inches that fell. So obviously that was yeah, that's pretty significant. That's a big difference. And that's why it caught a lot of people off guard, was because obviously 5 to 7 inches you can, okay, well, maybe we'll stick around. We might get some flooding, but we can live through that. 12 to 20 from 5 to 7, that's a very big difference. So yeah, naturally yeah, you can make the argument that there's some goose up there. You can make the argument for sure. So I understand that. But nonetheless, this is the river system or the water system in Texas. And this doesn't show like every single little bit, but this shows you everything necessary. The Guadalupe is down here. If y'all can see that, let me just try to zoom that in. I know it's cutting off, but it should still be okay. So Guadalupe's right here. If y'all can see my mouse cursor, Guadalupe is right here. If she just goes up right here, this is where Kerr is at. Okay, this is where Kerr County is at. So this is where this is happening at, where a lot of this is at, and a lot of this happened right along the Guadalupe. Guadalupe is one that is a very big waterway river in Texas. But as you can see, Texas is full of waterways. It's absolutely full of waterways, y'all. Flash floods are not something that is abnormal to happen in Texas. Plain and simple. They happen all the time. Flash flood warnings and watches happen all the time in Texas, y'all. So this wasn't a situation where it's like, oh, well, you got the alert, you should have evacuated. Unfortunately, and this is how it is. If you live somewhere where you have stuff like this, natural occurrences, then you understand. The fact of the matter is that you get alerts like this all the time. You get these, flash flood watches or warnings all the time, and largely you more or less ignore them because they happen all the time. And and for the most part, you're kind of prepared for these because they do happen, but you're prepared for your typical flash floods. No one is prepared for what this was. But unfortunately, that does play into it as well. Is that a lot of times, because remember, they started sending out watches and kind of like, the chances of high, flooding, like that, warnings prior to this all unfolding. And of course, people could have reacted to it then. But of course, like I said, in Texas, you get these flash flood warnings all the time. You get these watches all the time. Like they are common occurrence, literally common occurrence. As y'all can see, the waterway system in Texas is very, very, very significant. A lot of people don't really understand that about Texas. Maybe they see Texas in movies and they think it's like some desert, some western desert. No, Texas is a very rich and luscious place in regards of their water systems. Like it very much is so. It's a very diverse place. Of course, Texas has like seven different geographic like desert and plains and mountainous and like wherever those topographies or whatever those are called. But nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. Either way, there you can see that the river system here is very expansive, and that is why, of course, you see that a lot. Regardless of where you're at in Texas, you're going to see this pretty heavily. You're going to get some flash floods every now and then. And of course, remember that Texas is a lot of limestone. So limestone obviously is great, but of course it's limestone. So it maybe doesn't soak up as well. So there's a lot of places, especially in the hill country. The hill country is pretty much all limestone. So that definitely does not help the situation right there. And it will obviously allow water to kind of sit higher or, takes a bit longer for it to soak in, of course. So, of course, that's an issue as well. But nonetheless, you can see here that by this water system that they have in Texas, obviously, flash floods happen all the time. It's just not to this level of insignificance. Now, once again, like I said, this death toll has continued to rise tremendously. And when I say rise tremendously, I mean rise tremendously. I guess I can click this too. It's the same thing that's over there. But as you can see here, approximately 173 individuals are reported missing across the state. That's pretty significant. That's on top of the 119 that are already confirmed. So it's well into the 200s, probably going to reach 300 at the end of it. And that's very sad to say. And the real reason, and one of the main reasons why I want to bring this up and kind of show this stat, show this number, is because a lot of people are kind of like blaming, or like a lot of people think that it's just all right there at Camp Mystic. But the fact of the matter is that that was like 27 or 30 of the people who perished out of the 300. So what you have to understand there is that no, it's not just that. This was just an abnormal flood. It was just an abnormal flood. It caught everyone off guard very quickly. It happened late at night, which just does not help. Same thing with like things like tornadoes, yo. When tornadoes happen, there's nothing more terrifying than a freaking sleeper tornado. When it happens at night and it's pitch dark, because you can't really spot it, because you can't see it coming from a distance or whatnot. It's the same exact thing, where you're not seeing this flash flood happen because it's pitch dark, it's pitch black, so you're not able to really diagnose how the water's reacting or how it's rising or whatever until it's more or less too late. And of course, in these situations, when you're right next to the river, you're right next to the system, where you see this going on here with with all these waterways right here, then you obviously find yourself in a predicament where yeah, it might get bad. And so, for y'all who might be wondering, like, well, if you knew it was going to rain that much, why can they not know? Let me explain to y'all how a flash flood works. Okay, so let's say, let me explain to y'all why also this can be hard to predict and why it was hard to predict. It's because pretty much look at it like this. Okay, so this is Kirk County right here. I wish I could highlight this or something like that. But pretty much just look at like say this normally runs at like 12 feet, the river, Guadalupe River, or something like that. Say this is a hypothetical. Say it normally runs at like 12 feet. Now let's say this area right here to the northwest right here gets like 10 inches or something like that of rain. This area a little bit further to the east or something like that gets like 8 inches. This area a bit further down the river gets like 15 inches. So what happens here is that all these feed into it. They're feeding into the river. And when they feed into it, that river is rising at that point. So now let's say it's at the very top, it's 12. If another creek or stream feeds into it, so it pops up. It pops up, now it's at 20. So as it continues to go down, now it's at 20. And so another stream feeds into it, now it pops up. Now it's at 25. And as you keep going, now it's 25 foot, where it was 12, it's 25, but you keep going down and another stream flows into it. And I say that one's 10. So now it's at 35. You see what I'm saying? So it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes down. That's how this works. So when all these rains are happening in different amounts in different areas, and then they all converge into one, that's how these flash floods happen. So that's why they can be difficult to predict, because it depends on how the rain hits each and every area. It's not just like, oh, you get one area and then all the rain is, uniform across there, which is not the case. Obviously, that's not the case. That's not how it works. That's not how rain systems work. That's not how weather works. It doesn't just, oh, the whole state of Texas is going to get exactly 10 inches of rain. No, some areas don't get rain at all. You know what I'm saying? Like some areas get a whole bunch of rain. Yeah, obviously, that's how systems work. So that's why it can be complicated at times to predict how those are going to react. And that's what got them in trouble here, was because they were not able to pinpoint the localized, impact of how this would really work with all these different significant areas right across this river, getting different amounts of rainfall and them all feeding into this and so rapidly, because it was stagnant. It was right above this area and it stayed there. So you got heavy amounts of rainfall. Now, like I said, of course, the initial prediction was like 5 to 7 inches. So naturally, that's not really much reason to feel any panic or think that you can't manage that. But when the realization is that it's 12 to 20, yeah, that's a big difference. Of course, had they been able to see that, had the model shown that, then naturally people would have, of course, reacted accordingly. But that wasn't the case. And you can try to blame it on whatever, but at the end of the day, the models didn't show it, and these are extremely difficult models to really see. This type of system methods was, it can be extremely difficult to predict because of the nature of it, especially for these hyper localized areas. So I don't think either way it would have really, like, whatever your argument wants to be on this, I don't think either way it would have really made a huge impact on this situation. I think we would have seen a similar outcome regardless, because of how quickly it happened, how unpredictable these types of weather systems are, and then the fact that it just stalled, just boom, just it was pretty much a perfect condition. So that's what happened here, and that's why the devastation was so great. But as you can see here, once again, these time lapses on these things are significant. And there's a whole bunch of different types of videos. I haven't really gone through this list. I don't really care to go through it. But there's a whole bunch of these, and they're everywhere. You can find a whole bunch of these if you really want to dive into it. They're everywhere. And you can really see the significance of these floods and how they're happening. And how they happen at night. This is just it's really devastating on how it occurred and how these waters just overflowed. You can see some of these videos on like TikTok too. If you have a TikTok, let me look at that. Stop signs. Look at that stop sign right there. This is overflowing. But you can find some of these videos on TikTok too, because there's a lot of people who obviously record stuff. And I saw this one example where there was this lady and there's this comment. They were like, "How do you not know that there's a river in your backyard?" And so the lady goes outside, because obviously the water's receded now. And so she goes outside and there's nothing in there. Like the river is like half a mile, or probably not that far, but like a quarter mile away from where her house is even at. Her house is like elevated like 20 feet. You can't even see the water. And she walks all the way to where the river is at. You would never imagine that it would rise that far, like that high. Like I wish I could pull the video, but I don't know where the video's at. But it's very significant. Like her house is probably like 20 feet off the ground. And it's just like it's just flat land, but it's all limestone, of course. And the river, you can't even see the river. She has to walk like a huge distance to go even see the river. And the river was up to where her house was at almost. So it's like, you have to understand that this is it's just flash floods, y'all. Like when I said there, flash floods, they are flash floods, y'all. There's an emphasis on the flash. But this is a devastating event, and I really just want to kind of touch on this because as you can see here, so remember how I talked about those dips and stuff, because now it's not in the normal river basin that's normally in. So it's going through these dips where it normally wouldn't go through. That's bringing suction, that's grabbing stuff, that's putting stuff in there. Remember, y'all, it's not about, if like, say you're on a bed or something like that. Say you're in the camp and you get pulled by the water and you get to be like, someone just tell your mattress. It's not the water that's going to get you, it's what's in the water. So usually the surface of water is pretty still, but it's what's in the water. So because the water is now going over areas that normally would not be going over, land and whatnot, and now there's stuff in the water. There's cars lodged. There's these trees like this. You can see the water kind of moving sporadically there. Now you're getting all these different types of dips and curves and suctions and whatnot going on there, and that's why you see that water going completely wild. That's why these types of situations are so dangerous, and why it's extremely difficult to survive these. Once they're in that water, then it's not looking too good, pretty much. Especially if it's further down where it's picked up a lot of things. That's why these can be so extremely devastating. But obviously, the flash part of them is obviously going to make it even more devastating because they're flash floods. So that's what we kind of just wanted to discuss there and kind of talk on there, so people understand, and so that people can stop, so that people just realize and understand that these situations, this wasn't something that was like, oh well, just leave or just heed the alert or whatever. No, these are flash floods. These happen all the time, not to this degree. The last time that this happened, a flood to this significance happened in Kerr County was 100 years ago. So like sometimes nature just gives you those once in a century storms, right? We get those all the time everywhere. We get those once in a century events. This was one of those once in a century events, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. And there's a lot of lives that were lost, and you don't need to be bringing political stuff into this and talking about, oh well, they deserve to perish because of who they voted for or what their affiliate. Like, bro, you sound so ignorant saying stuff like that. I don't, like I said, I don't care where you align, whether it's Democratic or Republican or independent or whatever you're voting for, a duck or a goose or what. I don't care. It does not matter to me at all. You know what I'm saying? I see people for people regardless. But this type, like those types of comments are just out of pocket. They're out of pocket, dude. And all these people have lost their lives. Um, like I said, the death toll is probably going to reach 300, but they're searching them for missing bodies, and those scenarios are pretty crazy because you can imagine how many tree and debris were wiped up. So once that water recedes, you have massive areas of just tree forts, for a lack of a better way to describe. Just imagine 8 feet tall, high piles of just timber, just wood, tree everywhere for as far as the eye can see, like areas like that. And there's probably a bunch of bodies buried within and under those debris. So obviously, this whole searching for missing peoples will take some time. But yeah, as I just wanted to say, I am, as like I said, why I want to touch on this is, of course, I'm a born and raised Texan, so obviously Texas means a lot to me, and I felt the need to touch on this because it's not acceptable for people to be talking like this and to be so insensitive. We gotta do better as a people, as a society, because like the fact that it was even people jumped on that so quickly, while people have lost their whole lives, lost their children, all the above, and people are saying stuff like that. It's just atrocious. But hopefully, this is informative to some degree and helps you understand flash floods and help you understand the water system of Texas as well. So we understand that these are things that happen, and this was just a really abnormal situation. That's really all it was. When it comes down to it, it was just a very abnormal, once in a century storm type situation. Perfect conditions for everything to happen, the way it unfolded. So, unfortunately, that is what it is, and my heart and my thoughts go out to all those affected by this, of course. But hopefully, this helps. Be sure to like, subscribe, y'all. Comment down below. Let me know what you think about this whole situation, and I will see y'all in the next one. Spike content.